Okay, so for these, we're going to factor out what we can factor out and then see what's left. I'm going to look at this first one, and I'm going to look at the numbers and say what's the biggest thing we can divide out from there? We can divide a 3 out. Those are both divisible by 3, and nothing else. Because if we broke this down, if I just write it out as expand it as its prime factors, that's 3 times 3 times x. Okay, minus 6 is 2 times 3. And they each share 3, but nothing else. So I say, okay, I'm going to factor 3 out. What's left then? Well, what's left actually is what you would get if you crossed off that from each one. Okay, what are you left with on the first term? That 3x. There's a 3x there, and you can see that you could multiply these back together to get your original 9x. Okay, and if you crossed out that 3 from the second term, where it's in pink, minus 2 times 3, what's left? Well, that just minus 2. Okay. The biggest thing we can divide out is the 3. It can't give any x's from the second term, so you can't take any from the first term either. And that's it. Now, looking at the second one, the numbers, the biggest thing I can take all out of the numbers is 7. I see that they're all multiples of 7. So I'm going to pull a 7 out of there. And that's all I can get out of it. The first term has n cubed, so it could give up to 3 n's. The second term has n squared, it could give up to 2 n's. But the last term has no n's in it. And so if I can't get any from that one, I can't get any from any of the other ones. So I'm going to divide the first term, 14n cubed. I'm going to divide that by 7. 14 divided by 7 is 2, and none of the n's came out, so they're all still in there. Minus, I'm going to take that 35, I'm going to divide that by 7, because that's 7 sitting out front, and I get a 5. None of the n's came out, they're all still in there. Notice that if I multiply that negative 5n squared with the 7 out front, I'd get back to negative 35n squared. Okay? And plus, I'm going to divide 28 by 7. 28 divided by 7 is 4. That's it. If you did it right, one of the terms won't have the variable left in it. Okay? If you didn't factor enough out and you see a variable left in everything, that means you didn't divide the biggest amount out, or you just made a mistake of your calculations. But let's look at this. For the numbers, they're each divisible by 2. In fact, for the second term, 2 is obviously the most it can give because it is 2. So I'm going to pull a 2 out of there. But notice also that there are 3 x's there, x times x times x for x cubed. And there's 2 x's, an x squared there. And there's also an x here. That means each one of them can give an x. We can take an x from each one. Okay? Now, what do we do when we're going to divide that 14 by the 2? The 2 is what we factored out. So what's 14 divided by 2? 7. And we pulled one of the x's out. X cubed has essentially 3 x's multiplied together. You pulled one out front. Now it's only got 2 x's multiplied together left inside. Minus 2 divided by 2? 1. So we'll only write a 1 if we cancel all the x's out, but we don't. There's x squared there, 2 of them multiplied together, and we only pulled 1 out, so there's 1 left. And then the final term, that 8x, well, we divide the 8 by the 2. That's a 4. And then the 1x that's there gets brought out. And that's it. And as I said before, if you did it right, then you won't have, at least one of the terms won't have the variable anymore, right? And that last term doesn't have x's anymore in it. So that's a good sign. Okay, if you wanted to check it, you could multiply by saying this times this, and then that times that, and that times that. And if you did it right, you get back to your original.